As a non-scientist, it's daunting for me to work through the huge volume of information on global climate change. I've found that the most reliable scientific information comes from respected, peer-reviewed science journals. What's the mark of a good, reliable scientific journal? Generally, science journals don't carry ads telling you how to buy gold, survive a nuclear blast, or kick butt. For climate deniers, these are the essential features they look for in good science writing. For instance, the UK Daily Mail is a source deniers rely on for information. Did you see the story about the Chinese goat woman? That was awesome. See, the headline and the picture tell you all you need to know. Another awesome headline was, "ClimateGate U-turn as scientist at center of row admits there's been no global warming since 1995. Within hours of the headline's appearance, verbatim transcriptions began turning up on climate denial sites all over the internet. The story concerns Phil Jones, the lead scientist at the University of East Anglia, a major center for climate science. There's only one thing wrong with the article. According to the conservative Economist magazine, it's a complete fabrication, an out-and-out lie, which makes it the ideal climate denial story. The Daily Mail story was based on an interview published by the BBC, which most denialists know nothing of and certainly have not read. But as always, we'll read it here. Question: how confident are you that warming has taken place and that humans are mainly responsible? Answer: I am 100% confident that climate has warmed. There is evidence that most of the warming since the 1950s is due to human activity. Question: if you agree that there were similar periods of warming since 1850 and the medieval warming period is under debate, what factors convince you that recent warming has been largely man-made? Answer: the fact that we can't explain the warming since the 1950s with solar or volcanic forcing. Question: would it be reasonable, looking at the same scientific evidence, to take the view that recent warming is not predominantly man-made? Answer: no. Some of the more specific questions were gathered from climate skeptics, and they are obviously worded to elicit specific responses. For instance, question: do you agree that from 1995 to the present there has been no statistically significant global warming? Answer: yes, but only just. This is the quote that deniers ran with in headlines, conveniently omitting the remainder of the answer. I also calculated the trend for the period 1995 to 2009. This trend, 0.12 C per decade, is positive, but not significant at the 95% level. The positive trend is quite close to the significance level. Achieving statistical significance in scientific terms is much more likely for longer periods and much less likely for shorter periods. Scientists know that in a slow process like climate change, if you choose the right time period, you can show any trend you like. Measuring for longer periods makes it easier to reach the 95% certainty level that defines statistical significance. The year 1995 was most likely chosen because skeptic scientists like Richard Lindzen have often repeated that if you measure from 1995, you don't reach the 95% certainty level. He relies on an ignorant audience to conclude that therefore warming has stopped. An indication of why this question was asked came in a blog post from Luboš Motel, a self-described conservative physicist and climate skeptic. He wrote, "I discussed 1995 because that's the year BBC asked Phil Jones about, and for good reason. 1995 is the earliest year when the statistical significance of the trend to 2009 safely fails. Since 1994, you could get a technically significant trend." So it's clear the question was phrased to elicit an honest response, knowing the denialist mob would do the rest. It's a technique that's proven effective for the anti-science movement, and we've seen several variations.
And tonight, another global warming study debunked in the journal Nature Geoscience. A study was printed that showed the oceans rising because of global warming. Well, now the magazine says, sorry, Study was flawed.
The story is based on a retraction of a peer-reviewed study on sea level rise that generated misleading headlines around the Internet. The paper by lead author Mark Siddall stood out because it projected a relatively low level of sea level rise, from about 3 to 32 inches, a result that was hailed on climate denial websites as proving that climate change impacts would be mild. In the retraction statement, the authors extended gratitude to the scientists who pointed out the flaws in their analysis, Stefan Rahmsdorf and Martin Vermeer. Vermeer and Rahmsdorf had also completed a study of sea level that called for a much higher rise this century, up to almost 2 meters. These and other studies convinced Siddall et al. That they were wrong, that their estimate was too low and needed to be withdrawn. Other recent papers have projected high sea level rise in coming decades, including one by the U.S. Geological Survey, predicting much more rapid ice melt at the poles, and yet another predicting a rise of 0.8 to 2 meters by century's end. That's up to 6 feet, folks. The anti-science movement is desperate and angry. The basic science of climate change seems bulletproof, and it just keeps coming. Each new study seems to show even greater cause for concern. Scientific American editorialized on the escalating ugliness of climate denier tactics and rhetoric, noting that stolen emails and minor errors have done nothing to undermine the science. The editors wondered if we are a people increasingly estranged from critical thinking, divorced from logic, alienated from objective truth. As if to underline that point, the South Dakota legislature recently passed a resolution urging schools not to teach the science of climate change. The document stated that there are a variety of climatological, meteorological, astrological, thermological, and other forces that influence climate. Thermology, of course, is a discipline unrelated to climate science. And to say there's no difference between climate denialism and astrology does a great disservice to astrologers. What's revealing is that climate deniers don't know there is a difference. So the technique is to throw out as many baseless accusations as possible in the hope that some of the mud will stick.
Assault and battery, trespassing, disturbing the peace, miscellaneous misdemeanors, public nuisance, traffic violations, going through a boulevard stop, jaywalking, triple parking, conduct unbecoming to a wabbit.
Oh, she turned me into a newt! A newt. We got better. Burn already!
The anti-science movement's fascination with the 12th century goes way beyond just the temperature of the medieval period. There's a longing for a return to those values as well.
There's not enough knives. If the IPCC had been done by Japanese scientists, there's not enough knives on planet Earth for Harry Carey that should have occurred.
Making sure that every scientist at every university in this country that's been involved in this is named and fired, drawn and quartered, or whatever it is.
Not to be outdone, climate denier Mark Morano called for public floggings of scientists. What makes a great civilization turn away from science, reason, and civility to hatred of knowledge, ignorance, fear, and brutality? We seem to be running an experiment to find out. To stay ahead of the curve and avoid the tides of disinformation and propaganda, keep coming back to this channel, where we have a blast, find the gold, and kick some butt here at Climate Denial Crock of the Week.